back in December, I got an email from PublishAmerica, and they asked me if I'd be interested in speaking here. And it was news to me that anybody didn't want to hear me speak about my book. Then I said, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, well, you've been selling more than the average amount of ebooks, and we want to know how you do that. I think maybe you should know my struggle to get up here today with a book. And it starts back when I was about in the 5th or 6th grade, and I was sort of a geeky kid and did a lot of reading. Shortly, in a year or so, I was running out of books to read in the middle school library, and I noticed, now I don't know whether I just noticed it or whether it had been going on for years, but apparently my mother belonged to the Book of the Month Club, because I noticed this one day because the book came in a little cardboard box. And she dutifully opened up the book, looked at it, took it downstairs and put it on the shelf, the library shelf in the rec room in the basement, where, lo and behold to me, there were literally hundreds of these books down there. She'd been getting them for years, and I never noticed them. So I started going through these books and reading them. And a lot of them were, well, they became famous stories, and a lot of them were just damn good reads. There was a guy who, like, every 4th or 5th book had his name on it. And I started reading his stories. Has anybody ever heard of a fellow by the name of Frank Yerby? Frank was a damn good writer. I just kept reading his stories. And then one day, and I noticed on television a little movie came on. And it was called The Foxes of Harrow. And at the end of when the credits came on, I noticed it had been written by my hero, Frank Yerby. So I was, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. So time passes. I went off to military school and wrote a lot secretly. And you know, all of us who want to be writers find somebody who believes in you, believes in your writing. And there was a little old English teacher in military school. His name was Gordon Crawford, and he thought I was a dandy writer. But when you get to college, I took a lot of writing classes and a lot of literature courses. Reality dawns, and you have to figure out that you're going to have to support yourself with something. And obviously, writing books is something that 1 in 100,000 hit on making a living out of it. So I kind of put that aside. And I went on through college and law school, got a degree, started practicing law, and after about 10 years or so, I had got established enough to have a little spare time, and so I decided to start writing novels. Wow, that's a good thing to do. Except you need a little life experience to write a novel, and I didn't have much except reading other people's works and going to school and practicing law. I decided that if you didn't have any life experience, what kind of novel could you write? Horror fiction. Don't need much real life experience to write horror fiction. So that's what I did. That was back in about 1985 or 86. I wrote this book. I was still a young man when I wrote this book. It's sort of, for anybody who's familiar with horror fiction, it's sort of a cross between the Cthulhu myth meets the Mayan calendar. And, you know, it's 400 pages, and it took me a while to write it, primarily because I didn't know where I was going. I sort of had to feel my way through. And so there it was. I had it, but I didn't know what to do with it. I knew I had to get it to a publisher, but I had not the foggiest idea how you did that. So what I did was, I went to the Walden bookstores back, and it was in the self-help part, or I forget where it was. There was this book for sale, and it was called, I can't remember exactly, but it was called something like Writer's Guide to Publishing Books. And for $17.95, you could buy one. It was a hardcover book. So I figured, this is it. This will get me published. So I started reading the book, and like first paragraph in, it says, unless you have a literary agent, the chances of you getting published are about nil. So after I paid my $17.95, I was a little bit upset with that. Nevertheless, it did have two things going for it. It told you how to prepare the manuscript, to send it off, and then also the cardinal thing you had to do was put a self-stamped return address in it so that they'd send it back, which they did. Many, 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 many times. You know, the first 5 or 6, you kind of expect that. You know, this isn't going to be that easy, for Christ's sake. I'm not going to become Stephen King overnight. Well, after about 25 or 26, you begin to think, I got to be doing something wrong here. So I figured, well, this one just isn't topical enough. I mean, that was back in 1987. No one cared that the world was going to end in 2012. So I just put that one aside, and I started writing another one. One that I thought would be a little more topical. Now, this was in the early 90s. I knew from personal experience and local history that where I lived in western Pennsylvania, there was an incident back in 1794 called the Whiskey Rebellion, that in 1994 there'd be a 200th anniversary of it. So I figured if I researched the Whiskey Rebellion and wrote a book on it, I'd have it all ready to go for the 200th bicentennial, and it was surefire. Who could turn this down? Once again, I got all the list of historical publishers rather than horror fiction publishers, and off it went. Well, it came back quicker. So finally, after about 30 or 40 rejections, the bicentennial had passed. Okay, I get the message. I'm just not meant to do this. Time passes. I'm sick of practicing law. I'm never going to be an author, so I decide I like to meet people. I'll get a bed and breakfast, which I did. And up and running in the year 2000. Now, how do you advertise your bed and breakfast when nobody knows it exists? I went to the internet. That's today, 10 years, 12 years later, that's all I do. That's how I advertise. I have a website, and I have other sites that lead you to my website, other tourist sites, and that's how I get business. And surprisingly, within a couple of years, I started to get business. A lot of people come to my little bed and breakfast in a 300-person village in the middle of southwestern Pennsylvania where there's absolutely nothing. But they come and seem to enjoy it and come back. While I was moving from where I used to practice law to my bed and breakfast place, I ran across my manuscript. I'll give them one last shot. Then there I was, back to, now what do you do with it? I got on the internet. And how, publishers. The first thing that pops up is PublishAmerica. Now, I had some experience with being solicited by vanity presses who, for a fee, they would be happy to publish your book for $15,000. You too can be a published author. Well, that just didn't sound right. So I wasn't the least bit interested in that. And PublishAmerica said, we'll publish your book. We're not charging you anything. Well, that sounded like a good. I looked no further than that ad when I saw it. I sent them the book. They said, sure, send it down. Very short time. There it was. I mean, I was astounded when this thing actually came bound and looked like a book. I mean, it was like I had given birth to a son or something. There it was. Now, next thing, I should sell some of these things. But I'm running a bed and breakfast. I'm still working part-time as a lawyer and can't get out of it. I do not have the time to go out and talk the book. So I remembered my success with the internet. I researched the ebook situation a little bit, and as Mr. Miner says, that's an up-and-coming thing. So what I thought was, that's where I'll go. So I subscribed to every program that they offered to get your book on the web. And apparently it's actually selling some. And that's the secret of my success.